Sarah felt like all the long hours were finally catching up with her. Her routine had been a whirlwind of hospitals, dogs, and baby gear over the past quarter of a year. It almost seemed like a mirage. One could never be sure. But it was the odor that was the giveaway. She couldn't pinpoint where it emanated from. An occupied dad, Henry James, was pacing to and fro in the living room as his dog Sparky kept howling nonstop. Each time their 3-month-old son, Noah, was close, Sparky would emit a sorrowful moan that sent shivers down Henry's back. This had been the scene for weeks, and the more he attempted to understand it, the greater the enigma it became. He was certain there was a correlation between Sparky's behavior and Noah, but he couldn't figure out what it was. Henry sat in the living room, his face expressing puzzlement as he watched Sparky howl incessantly. His job at the stock exchange in New York City was taxing, and he looked forward to tranquility at home. But it was not to be. They brought Sparky home as a pup a few months before Sarah delivered. Sparky had always been a docile and serene dog, but recently, he wouldn't stop howling when Noah was present. This greatly disconcerted Henry, who was familiar with canine behavior. Mother Sarah, on the other hand, was preoccupied with her remote job as an interior decorator. She was perpetually hooked onto her laptop, busily attending to her tasks. She had noticed Sparky's howling, but dismissed it as him being overly protective of Noah. She was fond of her baby, however, she needed to catch up on her work after his birth, and his need for focus might have been somewhat overlooked. One evening, Sarah was on a business call, her laptop precariously located on the edge of the kitchen countertop. Noah was comfortably sleeping in his crib nearby, with Sparky lying beside him as if guarding him. As Sarah handled the call, she observed a brown spot on Noah's diaper. Her heart pounded faster. She had missed it until now, but it was clearly there. She quickly excused herself from the call, anxiety gnawing at her. What was the spot? How did it appear? Sparky let out a sharp moan, his gaze steady on Sarah as she approached the crib. She carefully lifted Noah, her heart hammering away. As she began to change his diaper, she realized that the stain had disappeared. It had gone as mysteriously as it had shown up. Sarah waved it away, assuming the fresh diaper brand was super absorbent, causing the marks to vanish. As Henry entered the nursery, worry and uncertainty were reflected on his face. "Did you notice it as well?" he inquired, nearly whispering. "Yes," answered Sarah, her eyes brimming with anxiousness. "However, it's now disappeared. What do you think it was?" Henry shook his head, his eyebrows knitted in thought. "I'm unsure, but it seems tied to Sparky's actions. We need to determine what's happening." Pacing nervously in the softly illuminated nursery, Henry's knitted eyebrows illustrated his worry. Sparky, their Maltese poodle, was perched at the door, his melancholic wails permeating the entire house. 3-month-old Noah lay in his crib, clenching his fists, exhibiting signs of discomfort. The baby's reactions went unnoticed by his parents initially, considering they often saw him making such faces while growing. It was the weekend, and Henry was around to attend to Noah. "Henry, what's wrong with Sparky?" Sarah asked, struggling to concentrate amidst the loud noises. "With all this clamor, I can't focus." Letting out a wearied sigh, Henry stated, "I wish I knew, Sarah. He's been acting like this for several days now. I suppose this has something to do with Noah. Each time Noah is near him, Sparky starts to wail, as if in severe distress." Sarah paused her work, anxiety clear on her face. "But why would Sparky behave in such a manner toward Noah? He's never shown such behavior before." "That's exactly my thought," Henry continued, scratching his head. "I believe something isn't right with Noah, and Sparky can sense it." The wailing only intensified with time. Sarah attempted to soothe Noah, but his crying didn't stop. He appeared all right and didn't even have a fever. She was trying to juggle her work and a cranky baby, which was wearing her out. Sometimes she beseeched Henry to stay home and lend a hand, but he consistently prioritized his work, insisting Sarah should handle childcare. The following evening, as Sarah was changing Noah's diaper, she spotted a brown blotch that she hadn't noticed earlier. The odor was ghastly, and she had to stifle her gag reflex. "Henry, come quickly!" she cried, her voice shaking with discomfort. Henry rushed into the room and instantly recoiled at the dreadful smell. "What in the world is that odor?" He advised her to turn the baby to examine the diaper. "Sarah, I'm a touch concerned," expressed Henry, an undertone of unease in his voice as he peered at his wife. engrossed in her tasks in her cozy home workspace. Whenever Noah is around, Sparky just can't stop howling. And Noah, he's been showing more distress than usual. Sarah dismissed this, moisture pooling in her eyes. I just spotted this brown mark on Noah's diaper. He may be unwell, she uttered emotionally. She hoped Henry would comprehend the situation. Sarah lifted her gaze from her workstation, visible fatigue in her eyes. I'm clueless, Henry. Maybe it's just Noah undergoing a change. Infants cry. It's natural. That's not normal, though, persisted Henry, his heart breaking with each wail of his child. And Sparky, he's trying to communicate something. He was unimpressed with his wife's indifference. She could be more attentive. He suspected she was using inappropriate diapers. With a sigh, Sarah stood up. Okay, let's check on Noah together. It was clear to her husband that she was pausing her work because of Noah. On reaching the crib, a smell hit them. Sarah's eyes grew wide with shock as she spotted a brown mark spreading on Noah's diaper. Ah, Henry, I didn't see this earlier, she gasped, her hands trembling. Fear washed over Henry. We have to determine the cause. Maybe that's why Noah's been in such distress. With shaky hands, Sarah gently turned Noah around, uncovering a problem much worse than they had predicted. Noah groaned in pain, his small frame convulsing from discomfort. He's got a tummy upset, Sarah muttered, her voice quaking with horror. Oh, Henry, what's our next step? Henry attempted to take charge of the situation, but he wasn't familiar with where everything was. Sarah was already changing his diaper and making him comfortable. We'll have to make him feel better and administer some medication, answered Henry, his mind overwhelmed with anxiety. He must be suffering so much. He scrambled through the cupboards, finding things as directed by Sarah. As Sarah attended to Noah, Henry picked up Sparky, who was apprehensively observing from the entrance. Good job, Sparky, Henry praised in a low voice, rubbing his ear affectionately. We appreciate you alerting us that something was off. He rewarded Sparky with a treat for his vigilance to keep him quiet. He had purchased several chew toys to maintain Sparky's silence, and it seemed to be effective. Once Noah was clean and given the necessary medication, an unsettling silence enveloped the house. Regardless of their attempts, Noah's health headed south in the following days. His outcry intensified, his miniature body overwhelmed with high temperature. Sarah couldn't help but feel terrible. She had believed that her remedies at home would improve his condition. She leaned more toward natural treatments. However, it wasn't doing the baby any favors. Henry was infuriated to witness his baby in pain, and he vented his anger at Sarah, blaming her for being an inadequate mother. As Sarah rapidly collected Noah's essentials, they made haste to the hospital. All of a sudden, baby Noah relieved a ton of gas, grabbing both their attention. Fear flashed across Henry's face. This is bad, Sarah. We must take him to a medical professional immediately. As they frantically drove to the hospital in the still of the night, Sparky's howling escalated, growing urgent and desperate. He had already worked through 2 rawhide bones. Sarah and Henry, anxiety evident on their faces, attempted to soothe Noah, who was crying inconsolably. They handed Sparky another rawhide bone, and he quieted down. They decided to take him along. Inside the car, the turmoil was too much for baby Noah. The concerned parents, now under a ton of stress, began arguing with each other. You're hardly at home. I carried him for 9 months and brought him into this world. Can't you contribute at least once? The squabble escalated as Henry claimed his employment was more crucial than hers, further infuriating Sarah. The pair seemed unable to keep it together with the baby wailing and the dog fidgeting in the back seat. Upon arrival at the hospital, medical practitioners checked Noah and affirmed that he certainly had a gastrointestinal issue. It was very mild since he was a baby, which was why the parents did not notice it at first. The odor will be your first warning, the doctor stated. They suggested a specific medication for him and guided Sarah and Henry on how to handle the situation. When Noah finally fell asleep, the pair felt a moment of relaxation, but it was short-lived. In the following days, Noah's condition got severe. He came down with a temperature, and his cries became louder. As if things couldn't get any worse, Sparky fell ill as well and was causing havoc around the house. It was utter chaos. Overwhelmed, Sarah put a diaper on him too. She couldn't keep up with the cleanup anymore. Sarah and Henry were drowning in their worries, and the sound of Sparky's howling only amplified their stress. The thought crossed their mind of finding Sparky another place to stay until Noah recovered. Sarah noticed Henry was on the brink of losing it. His normal fortitude appeared to have abandoned him, and she couldn't help but fret about what lay ahead. An ever-growing sense of apprehension filled her as she sought to uncover the root cause of all these uncanny occurrences in her house. It was as if they were plagued by a sinister presence, since her son was not getting any better. Each minute sound startled her, and she found herself habitually looking back, unable to disregard the sensation of being watched from the darkness. Regardless of her fear, she acknowledged that she required a clear mind if she was to untangle this confusing predicament. She had to be the most nurturing mother for her child, but she was totally oblivious of the impending shock. Sarah was engulfed by a wave of dread as she frantically looked for a way out. She had considered seeing several physicians before, even though she felt it would hardly make a difference. She was still groping in the dark concerning the whole situation. However, she was gradually realizing that medical help was her sole recourse. She reached for the phone and called a hospital that was not her frequent stop. But what she was about to discover would only compound her worries. Sarah's heartbeat escalated as she punched in the number, with torrid anxiety ruling her shaking hands. She needed answers, and she needed them immediately. The receptionist answered on the third ring with a perky voice. "Good afternoon. How may I help you today?" she hummed. Sarah inhaled a calming breath, trying to steady her frayed nerves. "I need to consult with Dr. Richards urgently," she answered, anxiety marking her tone. There was a momentary silence on the other end before the receptionist responded. "I regret to inform you that Dr. Richards is presently not available." Sarah's heart sank. This was arguably the most disheartening response she could get at a time like this. But the receptionist hadn't finished yet. "Would you like to leave a message?" she inquired. However, Sarah felt a rush of annoyance ascending within her. She had to speak to someone immediately, not later. "I need a doctor right now. It concerns my son, Noah. He's been unwell for several days, and I'm at my wit's end." She ended on a trembling note, her voice weighed down by emotion. The receptionist responded with a sympathetic sigh. "I understand, ma'am. Let me look for someone else who may be able to assist you." Sarah's heart palpitated as she agitatedly anticipated the receptionist's return. She had an overpowering sense that time was against her, and she needed assistance expediently. When she was almost at the brink of despair, a voice broke through the silence. "Hello, this is Dr. Stevens. How may I be of service today?" Sarah felt a spark of hope ignite within her. Perhaps this doctor could provide the help she so desperately sought. She hurriedly relayed Noah's symptoms, her voice quivering with emotion. Dr. Stevens paid careful heed, interjecting with several queries along the way. Once Sarah had finished conversing, there was a silence before the doctor broke it. "I recommend that you bring Noah in for an examination. Is that feasible for you? I can accommodate you this afternoon if that suits you. Can you make it here by 3 o'clock? Relief surged through Sarah as she expressed her heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Stevens. At long last, she was being taken seriously. She promptly ended the call and raced to inform her husband of the headway she'd made. Henry was appreciative of the update. The whole situation had been weighing on him, and while Sarah recognized that he'd first give up his own life before collapsing under strain, she could see the toll it was taking on him. With a warm embrace, she reassured him that they would be all right. He silently let out a breath, the edges of his lips harboring a faint, melancholy smile. It almost seemed he doubted her words. With a final pat on the forehead, Henry departed for work. Having the day off, Sarah hastily got Noah ready for the hospital visit. As she fastened him into his car seat, she couldn't shake a burgeoning feeling of hope. Potentially, they could finally obtain some clarification today. She was desperate to comprehend what was happening to her little treasure. However, she was unaware that the revelations they were about to stumble upon would merely result in further queries. Sarah drove with unwavering resolve, clutching the steering wheel firmly. She was intent on unraveling this enigma and understanding Noah's ailment. Nothing was going to obstruct her path, not even the lingering doubts lurking in her conscience. As she parked in the hospital lot, she took a deep, steadying breath. For Noah, she had to demonstrate courage, no matter what awaited them. With enduring determination, she lifted him and walked toward the hospital building, prepared for any ensuing hurdles. The waiting room was crammed with individuals, their anxious countenances mirroring Sarah's inner trepidation. She located an unoccupied seat in the corner and made herself comfortable, holding Noah close to her chest. Hour after hour passed by as they waited for their appointment with the doctor. Sarah did her best to keep Noah amused, humming gentle tunes to him and caressing his petite fingers. However, her thoughts were elsewhere, brimming with anxiety and dread. To top it all, she still had her pet to worry about. Her stress was at its pinnacle. Finally, when their name was summoned, Sarah's heart pounded wildly in her chest. It was the moment of truth. She boosted her courage and stepped into the examination room, prepared to confront whatever was in store. Dr. Stevens welcomed them cheerily as they entered the room, his warm grin making Sarah feel relaxed. Without losing any time, she outlined Noah's symptoms once more, her voice strong in spite of the apprehension twisting her insides. Dr. Stevens was all ears, nodding while Sarah spoke. Once she had stopped, he shifted his focus to Noah, serious as he commenced his examination. Sarah inhaled deeply, anticipating his verdict. She watched as the kind doctor took her child and gently laid him on the blanket-covered examination table. After what seemed like forever, Dr. Stevens stood up straight and turned to face Sarah. "I'm afraid Noah's condition is quite severe," he uttered gravely, "but I can't confirm what's wrong at the moment." The words sent chills down Sarah's spine. The fact that even the doctor, who seemed like a seasoned veteran, had no answers was dismaying. Distress flooded Sarah as she listened to Dr. Stevens' words. She had come in hopes of finding answers, a remedy for Noah's pain, but was confronted with uncertainty. "What do you mean by, you're not sure?" she demanded, her voice wobbling from the rush of emotions. Dr. Stevens let out a sigh, his forehead creasing in worry. "I've conducted a few tests, but till now everything seems to be normal. There's no hint of a disease or infection that could explain Noah's condition," he clarified. The news was a blow to Sarah's heart. How could this be possible? She had brought Noah to the hospital expecting to get some clarity, but it seemed they were back to where they started. As Sarah tried to decode the doctor's words, her mind swirled with possibilities. What could be triggering Noah's symptoms, if not a severe disease or infection? Could it be something worse? Dr. Stevens noticed the terror and puzzlement in her eyes and did his utmost to assure her, "We'll continue to run tests and keep a close watch on Noah. We hope to understand what's happening soon," he conveyed, his voice gentle yet grave. Sarah just nodded, struggling to suppress the impending flood of tears. It was such a powerless feeling, seeing her little one in pain and not being able to provide him relief. All she could rely on was the belief that someone would soon have answers. Clinging to this tiny spark of optimism amidst the chaotic uncertainty of Noah's health, she was determined there had to be a way out, a treatment that could help her child improve. For the moment, all she needed to do was let her husband know about the latest information. Regardless of how long it took or how many medical practitioners she had to consult, Sarah was resolved to do whatever was necessary for her son's better health. Noah's well-being was her ultimate priority, and she wouldn't rest easy until he was his usual chirpy self. With this resolution accompanying each stride, she exited the hospital, cradling Noah. She knew their journey was far from its end, but giving up was not an option. In the ensuing days, Sarah left no stone unturned in her quest for answers, visiting specialist after specialist with Noah. However, no matter how many tests were administered or doctors they met, the results displayed no anomalies that could explain Noah's symptoms. With each passing day, Sarah faced a growing sense of frustration. It seemed impossible that no one could identify her baby's condition. Nevertheless, she was not one to waver, refusing to abandon hope. Growing increasingly frustrated and anxious, she decided to conduct her own investigations. Nonetheless, an unexpected obstacle was about to emerge that jeopardized not only her relationship with Henry, but also endangered their young son. Barely a week had passed since her visit to the new doctor, when she stepped into the nursery expecting to find Noah sleeping or engaged with his toys. That's when she realized something was very wrong. Contrary to her expectations, Noah was nowhere in sight, and the nursery was unnervingly silent. In the face of this alarming sight, a wave of panic took hold of Sarah, and she instinctively began to search the room, checking under and around every nook and cranny. But there was no sign of Noah. A chill ran down her spine as it dawned on her that her baby was not there. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she let out a gut-wrenching scream, realizing the terrifying truth. Her baby was missing. Every nook and cranny of the room was scoured in desperation, but she couldn't find her child anywhere. Her mind whirled, trying to figure out where he might be. Then the sound of barking came from another room. Could it be Sparky? Was he with Noah? Without a second thought, she dashed from the room, moving as swiftly as she could to investigate. Heart pounding like a drum, she swept into the next room and came to a sudden standstill. The sight before her made her heart heavy with dread. Realizing her worst fear had materialized, she felt tears spring to her eyes. The moment she heard Sparky's barks, she ran in the direction of the noise. But unfortunately, she didn't anticipate this to be a tale with a happy conclusion. The barking seemed to be originating from the restroom, which was odd given that Sparky was never confined there. Moreover, it was baffling that the bathroom door was shut since nobody should have been in there for hours. She mused about how they had somehow gotten inside. The mother could hear a constant stream of barking and the faint sound of her son, Noah, crying. She puzzled over how Sparky and Noah could be in a locked bathroom. As it hit Sarah that her child was alone in the bathroom, her heart began to race. She knew she needed to act swiftly to prevent any disaster. The container of spare keys was her next stop. As she rummaged through the keys, her hands shook. She could hear her baby's whimpers and calls for her mother, amplifying her sense of urgency. Eventually, she found the bathroom key and hastened toward the locked door. Her hands shook as she inserted the key. But something was off. Sarah's heart pounded as she tried to determine which key was for the bathroom door. She was desperate to open the door to her distressed child. She was certain she had the right key, but the lock wouldn't turn to her dismay. Fear set in as she realized that the door was not locked from the start. What could be blocking it from opening? Guided by her maternal instincts, she decided to take control. She began to strike the door with all her strength, hoping to remove whatever was keeping it closed. Yet her adrenaline had her on edge, with little idea how to use that force efficiently. The door resisted and moaned, but persistence ensued. Sarah was committed. Her forceful footwork continued until finally the door gave way, with a thunderous crash. What she encountered inside the bathroom was shocking. The unexpected and alarming sight was almost beyond belief. As she ventured into the bathroom, Sarah discovered Sparky resting on the floor, while Noah was propped comfortably on the toilet. It was left to her imagination whether Sparky might have guided Noah there with some canine form of lavatorial assistance. The thought of such a shrewd maneuver by a pooch filled Sarah with a certain respect for the steadfast pet. But an even more urgent inquiry was why they were both suffering from upset stomachs. Sarah felt in her gut something was amiss, and she could not dispel the suspicion of a hidden matter at the root of it all. Ignoring her initial befuddlement, Sarah realized she was on the verge of discovering the truth. She returned Noah to his crib, her mind churning with thoughts. Sarah and Henry found themselves gripped by worry, their once tranquil haven now swamped in turmoil and apprehension. Neither could eat nor sleep well. Such was the toll it was taking on their marital bond. Faced with the distressing situation of his son's ordeal, Henry found it hard to keep his sanity intact. His dream of having a child with Sarah was not supposed to be this way. He didn't expect this. Overwhelmed, Henry knew he needed to retreat for his own peace and stability. "I need a break, Sarah," he admitted one evening, his voice heavy with emotion. "I need time alone to clear the cloud in my head." His guilt was evident. He recognized his selfishness. He was about to leave Sarah in a tough situation, but it was necessary for their sake. Sarah's heart cracked and crumbled at his declaration, but she knew he needed time to sort his thoughts. "Take all the time you need, Henry," she offered kindly, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "I'll handle Noah." Henry confided he was planning to retreat to his parents' home for a few days. Sarah was disappointed in Henry, but she had no other choice than to summon her strength for their son. She knew she could manage on her own. With only her son and loyal dog in the house, Sarah discovered deep resilience within her. She attended to Noah's needs ceaselessly, unwavering in her resolve to help him through the hardship. Even Sparky adjusted to the cost-saving diapers that saved Sarah an immense amount of time. Sarah was adjusting to single motherhood nicely. Days turned into weeks, and Noah's health started to bounce back. His persistent tears diminished, substituted by the sounds of his delightful giggles reverberating through the house once more. Life was beginning to fall into place for Sarah. She found joy in everyday activities and even managed to take Noah and Sparky for a day outing at the park, without feeling the need to give Henry a ring. After a month, Henry came back, his expression showing deep regret as he met his wife and child. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he murmured, his voice laden with emotion. "I should never have deserted you." However, Sarah only gave him a warm smile, her eyes twinkling with pride. "You're here now, Henry. That's all that counts." She took the higher road, and now her family unit was mended and whole again. As a family, they enjoyed watching Noah and Sparky play on the floor, their joyful laughter warming the room with affection and love. They had gained some parenting wisdom and realized they had more to learn. As they cherished their togetherness, they fully understood that their family bond was stronger than it ever was. One thing was crystal clear: they desperately needed a larger living space for their family of 4.